Hi everyone, my name is Herkif and welcome back to my incredibly stupid hardcore world where I'm only allowed to use wooden tools and leather armor. In our last few episodes, we've been doing quite a lot of building, as we've essentially completed our mega base as well as an aquarium, which, granted, has a rather questionable use case. So in today's episode, I decided to switch things up a bit. Since I hated my life last episode when I had to build a rather large platform whilst crouching, I thought it would make sense to go and grab ourselves the Swift Sneak enchantment to combat our declining mental health. And we also need some skulk for our next build that I have planned, so this seemed to be the most reasonable thing to do. However, before going out on our rather epic adventure, I thought it might be a good idea to go grab ourselves some copper. The reason we needed copper was because we've had a few times where we almost had our custom trees get hit by lightning. And a rather fun fact about trees, they are rather flammable. And since I'm not a huge fan of having my stuff destroyed, I thought it would make sense to make a few lightning rods. And once the lightning rods had been installed in a very action-packed and exciting manner, I started exploring in hopes of finding an ancient city. However, it didn't take long before I got distracted by an acacia tree, as I thought we might want it for our future builds. But with the wood acquired, I finally got onto our search of the fabled ancient city. My strategy to find ancient cities is rather straightforward, as I simply dive into random crevasses by mountainous areas. So I flew into one of the crevasses I found by a mountain and found some glow squids. And since we actually needed glow ink sacs, I decided to exterminate the small population I had stumbled upon. I then continued exploring the massive cave and actually found an ancient city, which was very epic. And this is when I realized that I had completely forgotten the fact that the deep dark biome is rather deep and dark, and that it would have been a very good idea to bring potions of night vision. But since I'm very lazy, I couldn't be bothered to go back to my base to brew said potions, so I decided to simply continue. And I went on with the exact same strategy as I always do when looting ancient cities, which is to sneak up to a chest, break it, and fly away in absolute terror. And after a bit of looting, we got ourselves a ward armor trim, which made me remember that armor trims existed. And with that realization, I made the decision that I would try to get both of the armor trims from the ancient cities in addition to the Swift Sneak enchantment, so that I won't have to deal with these ancient cities again in the future. And after a tiny bit more looting, I managed to get a Swift Sneak 3 book, which meant that the only thing left that we wanted was the Silence armor trim, which for context is the rarest armor trim in the game, meaning we would potentially have to raid a bunch more. And after having convinced myself that the best thing I can do with my life is to search for a rare collectible found in a game made for actual children, I continued looting, but alas, no Silence armor trim. I did, however, get the Other Side music disc, which led to a rather nice boost of serotonin. And once I had finished taking possession of someone else's belongings, I flew off once again to find another ancient city. And now you might be thinking to yourself, shouldn't you go back to your base and brew some potions of night vision? That would make it so much easier for us as the audience to see what you're doing. And to that, I respond that you are absolutely correct. But anyways, I got on to looting the second ancient city that we had found using the exact same strategy as before. But after having looted our second ancient city, we had still not been able to find the Silence armor trim, which was rather disappointing. Defeated, I got back to exploring in search of yet another ancient city, though shortly after I started exploring, I came across a pillager outpost that had a whopping 12 scarecrows, which was an absolutely insane find. So I grabbed all of the carved pumpkins and set off once more. But at this point, my luck in finding ancient cities seemed to have taken a turn for the worse, as I went on to spend 20 minutes flying into random crevasses without finding an ancient city. And now you might be thinking that 20 minutes isn't a very long time at all, but I happen to not be very patient, so I made my way back to my base and got on with the pleasurable activity of sorting items into chests. I also went on ahead and applied the Swift Sneak 3 enchantment to my leather trousers, which was a huge relief. However, despite having plundered 2 ancient cities, we still didn't have the Silence armor trim, which was rather bothersome, so I simply had to continue. But this time, I decided to actually brew some potions of night vision. I know, I'm very smart. I then set off once again to find more ancient cities, though I rather quickly ran into another pillager outpost, which yielded another 4 carved pumpkins. I also decided to have a cheeky little look into their chests in hopes of getting another goat horn, but got rather disappointed. So off I went yet again, and after having spent significantly longer than I wanted to, I finally managed to locate another ancient city. So I drank one of the potions of night vision that I had very intelligently brewed for myself earlier and got to looting once more. And shortly thereafter, I actually managed to get my hands on the silence armor trim, meaning that we would never have to return to another ancient city, which was very epic. Though I did continue looting the ancient city and figured I'd grab some candles, as it's currently impossible for me to get honeycombs as I'm not allowed to use shares. And as you might remember, one of the main reasons we needed to raid ancient cities was to get our hands on some skulk, as we will need it for our next building project. Well, another resource we will need for that project is basalt. However, most farms I found on YouTube were either unfeasible or used TNT duping, which I didn't like. So I decided to try to design my own farm with the goal of making it as TNT efficient as I could. However, I forgot to record that, as per usual, but this is what I came up with. The concept is most likely very similar to farms that significantly smarter people have built, and they have most likely gone about it in a significantly smarter way. And by looking at the redstone, I'm sure you were able to tell that I'm not very smart. However, it did what it was supposed to, so I decided to build it anyway. So I started collecting the things we would need for the farm and flew off to our gold farm, as I thought it would make sense to build the farm right next to it, so that we can have both farms running at the same time. I know, I'm very intelligent, and once I had picked out a spot for our basalt farm, I began constructing it. However, after having 2 out of the 4 basalt generators completed, I realized that one of them was 1 block off, so I had to go back and redo the redstone, which showcased my immense level of intelligence and planning skills. And after an absolutely excruciatingly long time, all of the basalt generators were finally in place. I then covered it all in crying obsidian, so it wouldn't blow up. I then gave it a quick test to see if all of the timings were correct, which, rather surprisingly, they were. However, I then made an absolutely horrifying observation in my creative world. Apparently, I could have used 5 layers instead of the 3 that we had done in our hardcore world, and by doing so, the farm would become significantly more TNT efficient. So I hopped back in our hardcore world and got to work modifying our farm to accommodate 2 additional layers of basalt. This also involved breaking a bunch of the crying obsidian which I had placed earlier, and safe to say, my will to live plummeted rather quickly, but eventually, after a lot of trial and error, we had finally managed to complete our basalt farm. So I flew back home and collected enough sand to make 57 pieces of TNT. I then returned to the farm with said 57 pieces of TNT and activated the farm to test its efficiency. And once my epic AFK session had ended, I returned to 3 full shulkers plus 8 stacks of basalt, which was good enough for me. So now that we had our supply of basalt dealt with, we needed to find a source of skulk, and since I had used up all of my brain cells to deal with the basalt farm, I decided to follow a tutorial made by someone who was actually smart. So off I went to collect all of the materials I would need. The first thing that we had to go out of our way to get our slimy hands on was honey, as the farm required a single block of it. So I flew off in hopes of finding enough beehives to get a block of honey, but rather annoyingly, I couldn't find any beehives at all close to my mega base. So I decided to fly back to my starter base, as I thought I had seen some over there, but got rather disappointed as I couldn't find any damn beehives. But after having another look around, I did manage to spot quite a few, which was very epic. So I emptied them of honey and stole the homes of the seemingly almost extinct local wildlife, in case I would want to involve them in a future slavery operation. And after a while, I managed to craft myself the fabled honey block. So I returned to my mega base once more and started gathering everything that I would need to construct the skulk farm. However, I made the rather horrendous observation that we didn't have any dripstone. I had seen it several times, but had for some reason never picked any up, which was a fact that finally came back to haunt me. So I started flying into random crevasses once more in hopes of finding some dripstone, which for some unknown reason had apparently become one of the rarest things in the entire game. But eventually, I did manage to get some, and with that, I was now ready to build the skulk farm. The skulk farm that I decided to build was a design by Ray's Works. The idea of that farm is to hook up an Enderman farm to a stone generator to have skulk be generated with a skulk catalyst, meaning it would have to be built in the end. So I flew off to our end portal and started building the farm. And once the farm was done, I decided to give it a quick test, and the farm seemed to work perfectly, which gave me an immense ego boost and made me feel very smart. However, that confidence and sense of accomplishment didn't last very long, as the farm stopped converting the stone to sculk for some reason, which was rather concerning. And since I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, I figured that it was because of the sculk veins that were now covering pretty much the entire farm, so I decided to attempt to remove the sculk veins in hopes of fixing the farm. However, since I am rather dumb and often act against my own interest, I looked at an Enderman, which almost killed me, but with that rather butt-clenching moment aside, I got on to fixing the farm, though this was easier said than done, as this would mean that we would have to stop the Endermen from falling to their deaths and generating more sculk stuff. So I figured that the easiest way would be to put slabs all over the spawning platform. I then replaced the blocks I used in my drop chute with slabs so that the sculk veins wouldn't be able to spread there. And once all of this was done, I removed the layer of slabs from our spawning platform and tried using the farm once more. However, it still didn't convert the stone into sculk, which was very frustrating. But then I tried breaking some of the sculk sensors that had generated earlier, and this fixed the farm for some reason, meaning I had risked my life twice and spent a bunch of time for absolutely no reason. But that is about all that we have time for in this episode. So there we have it, the 9th episode of my incredibly stupid hardcore world. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you in the next one.